Welcome back to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners policy session for July 3rd, 2021. Gary, what is up first?
Thank you, Chair Smith. First policy session today is Internet Service Provider and Broadband Update Report. This is an update from what the prior board asked staff to research, and that was, should Clackamas County become an Internet Service Provider? Yes or no? This is the final report, and answering that question, we have Dave DeVore, Interim Director of Technology Services. Congratulations, Dave. 5 days on the job so far. Doing great. And Duke Dexter, Program Manager for the Clackamas Broadband Exchange. On the telephone is Cindy Becker from County Administration and the consultants who work with us on this report. But Duke and Dave will be the main presenters. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Commissioners, Chair Smith, and Mr. Schmidt, I appreciate you talking to us today. We're here on something that's been a long process, but I think we actually have a very good report before you today. It's a very big one. From the history in a nutshell, about 10 years ago, as you know, CBX was formed to use an NTI fund to put broadband infrastructure into the county, basically dark fiber. That's been very successful for the last 10 years. It's been growing thanks to Duke and some other folks. It's been getting bigger and bigger and doing a very good job of delivering services to the ISPs and agencies. Oh, thought that was me. And other folks and other agencies have been able to use. The question came up recently, about a couple years ago, where do we go from here? Do we become an ISP? Do we start delivering services ourselves? Well, that is a big question. There's a lot involved in that. We did several iterations of looking at a business plan. None of them really answered the question all the way through. Where did we need to go? There's a lot to it. So we put an RFP out and hired a company called Uptown. Uptown. They have done many other agencies building their business plans and helping them implement. We were very impressed with them. And as you probably saw from the report they came out with, which was a book, they did an extensive study to determine what are the options and built several options around, should we just continue to deliver services as we are? Do we take on additional levels of internet service? Do we partner with an internet service provider, or do we just flat out become one? They looked at several things like our technology, the funding models, our geography, the kind of the kind of customers we would be serving, put together several proposals and basically did the performance and penciled it out. Would it make sense to do that? In a nutshell, what it came down to is their recommendation was, A, continue to do your wholesaling, which is delivering our dark fiber, and 2, do not become an ISP. It just does not pencil out. There's just no way to make enough money to become sustainable. We would end up borrowing a lot of money and never paying it back is what it comes down to. However, there's still the need to get more internet services out there. Their recommendation was, wherever possible, partner. And we've actually got a pilot project doing that right now with SandyNet to see if it works up in Qantas, which Duke can go into more detail, and it's working very well. Their recommendation was, wherever possible, try to partner and start small, grow wherever we can, and get as many houses as we can serviced by local vendors. They also recommended going with the local ISPs for both for local customer service and cost. So bottom line is, what we're coming to you today is to recommend that, given the different ways we could do service, we would like to recommend your approval to proceed as a business model of continuing as a wholesaler and going forth with trying to build more models of cooperation with basically P3s, both the private and public providers, to provide internet service to everyone that we can get on our fiber and build out. Related to that was also a funding model. They had several ways we could do some funding, like LIDs or borrowing money. Our model has been to be sustainable and try not to borrow money. Right. Their recommendation is now to go after funding such as ARPA or NTIA or any other federal state grants that would work with our type of environment. NTIA is the National Telecommunications Administration. They're actually the ones that did our original grant. And they have a little bit of money coming out again, so we're going to go after.
But it's a little on that particular funding. source. So my understanding that that is a very small amount.
280 million for 50 states.
Yeah.
Doesn't add to a lot, but you know a dime's a dime. We'll take everything we can get to build, because
Sure.
every customer we can add is one less customer that's looking for service in the county.
That's right, I agree. Well, on page 7 of the presentation says, business model, CBX does not need to become a retailer of internet services. In fact, the most financially viable business model is for CBX to remain as a wholesale provider and partner with an existing internet service provider. And they cite Sandy Net, just as you did, and it's a very big presentation here. I would tend to agree, just from the philosophy, is I don't think government should be competing with the private sector, because we have an unfair advantage over private sector business models, and it could be very cumbersome for us. If we're able to piggyback on the large dark fiber ring that was put in the county, and this department has, if this county can secure grant fundings and build the lateral lines, or maybe the private companies can't because it's not cost effective, and then either lease or sale back or whatever you call it to the county for the services, that's better than being in business, because it's a passive income source and we don't have the business model to support. And being in business for many, many years, I love passive income. And the ARP money, this board will be considering that. We had a briefing today. We understand that the language on that regarding broadband is very generous and liberal. We could certainly make an allocation for that. We just don't know how much. And any other sources that you guys can find to apply for grants, I think is the way to go. Now, have you targeted, besides Sandy area, have you targeted areas in the county where another expansion could happen?
We have a long list. Did you want to hit some of the big ones? But we have a long list of areas that we could hit.
So just so we kind of understand what we're kind of looking at, just through some data, for Clackamas County alone, we kind of estimate around 15,000 households don't have what we call the basic level of service. So that's 25 megabits upload and 3 download. And so that's the FCC level of what they call the minimum service level. So we have about 14,000 households that don't have that. Equate that out into a dollar standpoint, it sits at about $65 million.
Wow, because it's the most remote areas, I'm assuming?
It is the most remote areas out
And
there.
it's the most expensive because it's so remote. I mean, some of these houses could be a half a mile long, I mean, or more.
Absolutely.
There's
Yeah.
a reason why the providers aren't out there today.
Yeah, I was going to
Yeah.
say, that's why it's public trying to get it there.
Right.
whereas they're not.
You know, if we can do
marketing
anything to help, our local companies, for the telephone services, for instance, at Beaver Creek and Malala, and Monitor, and Estacada, and Sandy, all have their internet providers, but they can't afford to go out and service every single area. If we can help them, and then they can be the provider, that would be fantastic in my mind, anyway.
Well, Duke's been contacting several of the providers, if you want to hit those.
Yeah, so
that are
absolutely.
actually very open to it.
Okay, and who have you talked to?
Yeah, so Reliance Connects and
Reliance?
Malala Communication, Clear Creek, SandyNet, Ziply, Comcast.
Where is Ziply?
Yeah, there's one in that.
Ziply, so Frontier Communications
Oh,
was
yeah.
bought
Got bought
out
out.
by Ziply.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's the exact same thing. Just the new owner is Ziply Communications.
What was the one before Malala? It started with a T, Telenex, or?
Reliance Connects.
Oh, Reliance.
Yeah.
Is that Malala?
That is Estacada,
It's Canada.
Estacada.
or Cascade, I think is also the name they go by.
Cascade, that's
Yeah.
what I'm familiar with. Okay. And so they're open to these conversations.
Yes, some are not.
Okay.
And so, but we've reached out to, as you can see, a good handful at this point, and the ones that have shown an interest, then we're trying to come up with areas within their service boundaries that are potentials for some of this funding, and then talked about what that partnership might look like, who's responsible for what aspect of that service, the kind of a revenue share as far as from the monthly cost for that service, and what that looks like.
So let's take an area like Colton, which is halfway between Malala and Estacada. And I have some friends that live out there, and they're trying to homeschool their kids during COVID and all that stuff. They had a real difficult time on spotty internet. Who would take responsibility for an area like that?
That'd be Colton Tell.
Colton Tail?
Yeah.
And so are they interested in any of this?
I have not spoken with anybody from Colton Tell.
And then we had the town hall, as the commissioners will remember. We had a lot of people call in and say, you know, I live in this area, and I live in this area. And they were able to give us their addresses to help target that. And some of them were Comcast, and I think there was maybe some misinformation on how it works, where they could piggyback on PGE lines or not. I don't think that was possible. I think they came back and said, well, we don't do that. And so there's a lot of interest in this, because our work models, I think, have changed. Our school models have changed, and we're more dependent on internet in a much sooner time frame, because I think COVID accelerated that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Commissioners, do you have any comments on this?
Chair, I got a question. Now, you said we have about 15,000 households without, unconnected.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, real quick, not unconnected, but what we call underserved.
Okay.
Okay.
So the $65 million it would take to get them up to the
Yes.
standard you mentioned, that's about $4,300 per house. So it's not, the cost is not just an overhead wire, it's in what? The 65 million.
So the 65 million is actually the infrastructure. So that's what it would take to build out new fiber optic cable and drops and equipment for each of those 14,000 households.
Okay.
Now,
course,
the
some are cheaper
ongoing,
than others, but-
yeah, now the ongoing service would, or the operational costs would be covered by the monthly fees.
Right. Expensive.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Wow. Commissioner Schrader?
Yeah.
Fisher.
Oh, Mr. Fisher.
Schrader?
Go
Go ahead.
ahead, Mr. Fisher, it's okay.
I really like this PowerPoint. I don't know if we're going to go over it. If we are, I won't ask my question. But the piece that I really like is that map that's at the very beginning of the
Yeah.
presentation on page, it's the 8th slide. And I would love it, if it's not too much work, to be able to see that with an overlay of a little bit more of what's there instead of just the landscape, so I could see more easily what's close to what cities and what's out of the cities, and just sort of a better idea, or where there might be some roads.
Okay.
If that's a big, hard thing to do, that's
Now,
okay, but I don't read maps very well. I can't just look at this and say, oh, well, that's where that is.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
I mean, I can in some, but not
Yeah.
everything. It would just be.
yeah, primarily that's Highway 211, 224, and Estacada, kind of between Estacada and Sandy in that general area, but absolutely come up with a more detailed map. Be pretty simple to do.
Because I'm guessing the parts that aren't highlighted, so the parts that are highlighted, it is, I mean, maybe you can explain this just a little bit, what this means, density, and then premises and square miles.
Yeah, so primarily what it is
So the
is,
underserved regions, what does the premises mean, 1352?
I think that's the number of households, if I remember right.
Yeah, she's looking at this one right here.
Yeah.
Okay.
They proposed 6 service areas. that
Yeah.
they
Okay,
use
so
as
that's
part
the
of-
premises,
Yeah.
that's the whole premise, got it.
Yeah, and so these 6 areas are just, a smaller chunk of Clackamas County of unserved areas. And so they pulled from some data from 2019, and we know that the data they pulled, for 2019 is pretty good. It's probably going to change a little bit now that we've got 2 years in and more data kind of comes in, that these service areas may change a little bit based on that, plus other information that we're kind of taking in. But it gives a good example of what it takes to build out the infrastructure, be able to go to every residence and be able to provide that service. The costs associated with that, manpower, everything else, and then we can take that sample and then kind of extrapolate to the rest of the county.
Uptown
it
had to
really-
start somewhere and have an actual area to build their model off of, and they picked those 6 areas. because it's off of our fiber backbone.
Okay.
If you go to
Okay.
page 113, it gets into actual more detail for each one of those areas. A little bit of a demographic background, also a little bit more detailed map of the area. Again, like Duke's saying, these are good examples that obviously part of them we would want to hit, but this does not include all the areas in the county that will need assistance.
That was my next question.
That's
so
correct.
Yeah,
That's what I was thinking.
So just as a reference, if we're, if we're correct in our estimates, 14,500 people, this only represents 4,500 people.
That's still a lot if you're one of those 40%.
If you're part of that, yes, absolutely, but you can kind of see how that works out.
One thing Duke's working on now is, we're trying to look at where I hate to use the term lowest hanging fruit is, but when we know what kind of funding we'll have, we're looking at where is our biggest hit for amount of premises that we can get with those numbers. And obviously, the farther up the list we go, the less homes per amount of money, because it starts getting out into a farm that's 5 miles out versus ones that you get 3,000 maybe homes in one area. So we're trying to make sure we build a proposal that will maximize the funding to hit the most homes possible up front. And these are some of the better areas that hit, that right off of our backbone that we could hit. But there's a lot, like I know the town hall that you had, there were several people here from Colorado Road. And they're ones that have been wanting for years to have.
Hillock Road.
Colorado Road up, and you're trying to build something. up there.
Absolutely. Southwest, it's southwest of Sandy.
There were several people that were on the conversation that evening. I was listening, and they were from Colorado Road going, we need something.
Right, right.
So I know that there's some
Extremely
definite need
difficult.
out there.
And the terrain is so difficult, too. I would think self-service could be sketchy in some of those areas.
Yeah, and that was the problem, I think, if you remember from those calls, several of them had the Wi-Fi hotspots from the school, and in fact had one per student, but one, you run out of data.
Oh, yeah.
And two, it can be very spotty because of the terrain.
Gary, do they have a presentation to give, or, and how long is?
Well, I wasn't planning on going through it because it's basically backing up the recommendation. It goes into serious detail. Uptown did a really good job of trying to build a pro forma based on some assumptions around what we could do in the county, and it's based in here. But to go through this, to be honest with you, would take a long time.
Yeah, it's 177.
Emphasizing that right there, yes. But they did a very good job, but they started just going through some areas in the county, drilling down into what we can do in that area, what's required, what the cost would be, and does it pencil out, and just found it, no, it does not pencil out to be an ISP.
So, oh, shoot, I just lost my thing. Dang it. I pressed the wrong button, but that was a user error, not anything that you guys did. So you have targeted as the area listed here to be the first one, Sandy Net? The first for
Repeat that
expansion?
question?
For the expansion, if you were to get some dollars today, that we could expand the internet service in the county by actually putting the cable in the ground, what would be your first area? Do you have a priority list set?
That's something we're actually working on right now, trying to see how many we
okay.
can get per
I
dollar.
see, okay.
Because if we get X, we might go a little bit differently if we can get more in another area, but basically, we're just building up that count.
I see. For instance, if you had 10 million, that may be a different scenario than if you only got 3 million.
Absolutely.
Right? Okay,
Yes.
I understand what you're saying. That's fine with me. Totally fine with me. Does anybody have any other comments or questions?
Yeah.
Martha.
Judy, have you talked to the superintendents at all, the school systems, about this? Because that was one of the big things we heard during COVID, was that students were unable, because of the spotty, like you said, they'd have to go to hotspots. But, so these areas would help improve
Yeah,
access to,
absolutely. In
To
fact, we
school.
knew,
Okay.
at one point, we did reach out to Oregon Trail School District, which
Okay.
is the Sandy
Yep.
region.
Okay.
And we were aware of where kind of different students
Okay.
were located and all that kind of stuff. And not surprisingly, Colorado Road came up with quite a few students. So there's that, but then there's also what we're kind of call the Marmot Road area, which is kind
Right.
of northeast of the Sandy area.
Right.
And that has always been kind of an unserved area because it's hard to get to, and somebody mentioned it, the terrain is very difficult.
One of the folks we would be working with quite a bit would be ESD. They're one of
That's
our
what I thought,
partners,
yeah.
always have
They would
been.
really-
And we work with them
that's-
quite a bit, and they know the schools better than anybody,
yeah.
so.
And that was one of the big things the supers that we talked about with them. So, yeah, if you partner with the ESD, they could probably
They helped us out in figuring out where some of the hotspots were, but to be honest with you, the hotspots sound great,
They're not.
but you still have to drive out to the
Yeah, I
location,
know.
sit in your car, kids trying to do homework, you know,
It's not,
it's
it's not as,
not the same.
not
Yeah.
the same as having it right in your own
I
room.
mean, you got a few people through, but they need it in their homes. Or in
Sorry.
one thing we didn't talk about is also the fact that we also be hitting any businesses we can out there too. But mainly right now, it's to try to hit the residences, the premises that
Okay.
talked about in the study.
Yeah, I did some math, hope my math is right, 65 million to complete and 15,000 households, roughly $4,333 per household. That is very expensive, very expensive. Yeah, but we'll do what we can, get the grants that we can. Any more comments from commissioners on this? Paul?
Sorry I'm late. Wanted to clarify that under option 3, the way it reads, it doesn't read, you can read it two ways. So you see the staff recommendation?
I do, I see that.
Yeah,
It does. I was concerned about
yeah.
that.
It just reads, it can be read as we become the ISP, but we use the public-private partners to get us there.
To be the-
Whereas
yeah.
what this really means is contract with county private entities, but if they're already an are there any that are already ISPs? Okay,
Absolutely.
so really, essentially, where we could partner with, that could read, say, county contracts with public-private entities that are ISPs, right? That would make sense.
Well, I think when, Paul, if we want to entertain a motion, we could put that language in the motion.
Okay, I'll be happy to do that.
Go ahead.
That's what the staff. That's what the recommendation was meant to be. We just
Okay.
could have worded it differently.
Okay,
That's
so,
okay. Take a stab at it.
so I move that we accept option 3 with the amendment in the language being the county contracts with public-private entities as the ISP provider, that are ISP providers.
That are ISP providers.
And also under the funding section, option 1, seek available funding from federal and state resources.
Motion has been made by Commissioner Savas and seconded by Commissioner Scholl. Any further comments on this? Is the motion clear?
It is for me. Are you clear for you, gentlemen?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Clear.
Very clear, yes.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further comment, Shannon, please take the roll.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. Go forth and conquer.
Thank you.
You bet your
Congratulations, team. Well done. So you're a multi-year process, but
We're there.
ready for next phase 2. Well done.
Multi-year, yes.
I'm anxious to hear who the last person of that 15,000 is, one of these days in the future.
Any volunteers?
Yes.
All right, commissioners, your next session, because we have several outside guests, we should not start before 2:45, so you're almost an hour ahead of schedule. So
Wow.
unless there's other commissioner communications you'd like to have, I might suggest you take a break.
Yeah.
until then.
Let's take a 15-minute break and come back at 2:45, and let's be on time if we could. Thank you.
Well, 2:45 is 45 minutes, isn't it?
I know.
2:45. It is 5 minutes to 2, so 50 minutes.
15 minutes.
5-0,
Okay, I'm
5-0.
sorry.
That I wear when I go walking.
Oh, yes, right.
Daniel was out jogging today. Oh, my gosh.
Hello. We will begin. Welcome back to the Board of Clackamas County Commissioners Policy Session on this July 6th, 2021. We will now start our presentation on the 2021 wildfire season preparations. Gary, please tee this up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. We're here to talk about 2021 wildfire season preparations. We have many guests with us today, and I have a full discussion with the board. Our main presenters are Daniel Neibauer, Interim Director of Disaster Management, and Nancy Bush, County Operations Manager, who was Disaster Management Director. So they both have intense knowledge of this topic and will guide us through the day. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioners, and good afternoon. We do have several people here. Most of them are from outside of the county. We do have one from that is inside the county to give their perspective and what we're looking at forward and preparations that have been done for the wildland fire in this next season. I'm going to turn it over to Daniel. He is going to be your facilitator for today, and he'll be introducing our guests one by one as they come up and speak. Daniel?
Great.
Okay, thanks, Nancy. So you've heard a little bit from me on what we're doing for the wildfire season, both in preparing each weekend as well as kind of overall and how we're preparing for the entire season. We're going to be talking a little bit more in detail on the 20th of July policy session in terms of getting some feedback on the after-action report that's both for the wildfire and for the ice storm to do that. But we want to talk today about what some of our partners are doing on the preparedness side and going through that. So I'm just going to get right into it, let our partners get as much time as possible to kind of talk and allow you to ask questions. And I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Matthew Garrett, the Oregon Wildfire Recovery Director in the Governor's Office.
Welcome, Matt. Please state your name and title for the record.
You bet. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, I'm Matthew Garrett. I have the privilege of being the Wildfire Recovery Director in the Office of Governor Kate Brown, so I appreciate this opportunity. Madam Chair, what I thought, I'm sure your professionals have shared with you the extraordinary size and scope of the Labor Day wildfires, so I'm going to just assume that that's a given, all the brass tacks. What I thought I would do is share with you a quick look at kind of two sides of the same coin, the response and the recovery activities underway at the state of Oregon. I'm going to pull from a state of Oregon after action review. And because of time, rather than focus on the areas of success, what I thought, Madam Chair, is I would share with you the areas of opportunity for improvement, because that's the way we will continue to move forward and advance the opportunities both in terms of the response for 2021, but the recovery that we're smack dab in the middle right now. So with that document as my foundation, I want to first look at planning. The state must be organized and trained to take on more of the burden of executing response activities. This is one of the findings within this after action review here. They made a statement that the current posture was inefficient to manage a statewide incident of the size and scope that we experienced during the Labor Day wildfires here. Now, with that note, what has taken place or transpired in terms of some of the conversations that have presented themselves during the legislature? There has been investments and direction given to the Office of Emergency Management in terms of not only moving in direction to stand up a separate agency where they are the lead agency in terms of that type of activity, but also making investments and direction in terms of updating, revisiting, and updating our statewide operational plans in terms of emergency response and stuff. So looking at the structures, ensuring that we are in a better position in terms of the relationship we have with our local government partners, but maybe more importantly, the relationship we have amongst the various state agencies that touch the various functions of both response and recovery. I think the second area they identified was public information, the notification, the warning. This was a significant deficit that played itself out across the impacted areas here. And bottom line here is while the communication and alert warning type systems are usually locally controlled type services, for them to work, they, whether it be phone or be text, those systems rely on communication towers being intact and powered. Well, we found that during the wildfire, those towers were compromised and some were actually lost during the wildfires, rendering those notification and warning systems inoperable. There has been an investment, both an early investment by the Emergency Board of the Legislature in House Bill 5042, as well as the kind of the end of the session bill, the big, what became the primary recovery funding vehicle in the last legislative session, House Bill 5006, made an investment in the Oregon Alert statewide system here that will allow both state agencies as well as county partners and others to join in on a statewide alert system, assuring that we have another tool in the toolkit to notify our various public. Translation services was a deficit that we identified, ensuring we have information that's being provided to all our people within our communities here, in the appropriate voices, in the appropriate culturally sensitive type manners here. So once again, making an investment in that Oregon Alert allows us to put another tool forward to ensure that we are alerting and notifying our folks in times of crisis and danger. I think the other opportunity to ensure that the state agencies continue to move forward and are providing that level of information to the various communities is in the Department of Administrative Services. There was an investment in an Office of Cultural Change, establishing 4 positions that include a language accessibility manager to ensure that the information is being provided to the many and the varied communities that we have in this great state here. I think the next finding that I'll pull forward is the fire management and suppression type activity. Really, the finding here echoes the recommendations that were embedded in the Governor's Wildfire Response Council, investments needed to help Oregon in the following areas of advancing work with regard to fire-adapted communities, the restoration and maintenance of resilient landscapes, safe and efficient response to the wildfires, fuel reduction type strategies. Again, opportunities that come and are embedded in Senate Bill 762 that made an investment on the response side to move forward here. In terms of the continuum of care or mass care services, it identified some staffing gaps in the Oregon Department of Human Services that presented challenges that identified a better need not only to coordinate at the region level on the ground, not only with our local government partners, but with their community-based organizations, but also better organization and coordination between 2 state agencies that play a significant role in terms of helping wildfire survivors navigate the existing challenges and then the post-fire environment that they find themselves in terms of the various needs. So better working relationships between ODHS and Housing and Community Services, better understanding the overarching needs, but also the housing needs, given the fact that the wildfires in a lot of places took out, for all intents and purposes, the affordable housing stock here. So how do you transition these folks into shelters, into the hotels and motels, given the COVID environment that we were challenged with as well? But also, how do you move them into more secure and safe interim and intermediate housing options here? So understanding truly the wildfire profile of these individuals in terms of not only their housing needs, but also the various needs that they have to, again, navigate the post-fire environment is something that we need to tighten up, and we're working to do just that. Operational communications, I think the speed and unpredictability of the wildfires created these challenges across the board, across all the impacted areas here. So it demands that we reflect and we revisit the various points of context that we have between the state of Oregon and the various agencies we have engaged and our local government partners and the community-based organizations. We have a lot of conversations, but are they coordinated here? Are we in sync in ensuring that you as elected officials, the leaders of your communities, are getting the information you need to help inform your discussion, but maybe more importantly, providing the state with counsel and insights of what you're hearing from your constituents, those needs, to make sure there is that continuous loop moving forward here. There was some investment in terms of putting a little more boots on the ground, both in terms of the emergency management folks at their core center, but also in the regions to help coordinate both the response and recovery type activities. So if I flip the coin now and move from response and move to recovery here, just to be blunt, this was actually the first time the state of Oregon had truly used and engaged its state recovery plan. So there was a learning curve, to be very honest with you. There was a learning curve as we continued to move forward and we transitioned from the 18 various emergency support functions to the 7 statewide recovery functions here. How we synced up. So we were stressing a new structure for all intents and purposes with the biggest, baddest disaster the state of Oregon has faced here. So that created some opportunities, but it created some challenges that we're looking into. So this interagency, this inter-function recovery response function, collaboration and communications, what's tested. I think we identified opportunities to tighten up the way we do business to ensure that we don't stay in a bureaucratic silo, that we are working cross-agency, and then with our local government partners as well to ensure that the council and the insights are being communicated at the appropriate time in the real time that's needed to inform advancing recovery type efforts here. Pivot now to the legislative activity, because that really is the jump-off point for recovery now. It really started with the governor's charge to State Treasurer Tobias Reed and Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle as they stood up and they chaired the governor's Wildfire Economic Recovery Council. That council met from about October to the very first week of January of 2021. The council identified 23 different recommendations that I think became fundamental and foundational to the legislative conversation that was taken up by the House Wildfire Recovery Committee chaired by Representative Brian Clem. Identified the needs, the wants, the challenges. Mr. Clem and his committee held extensive public hearings, I think 14-plus hours of hearings. I think, Madam Chair, you had the privilege to speak to it. Commissioner Schrader, I know you had a chance to share your input as well. Given those inputs from your colleagues across local government, both at the county and the local level, various businesses, various community-based organizations, the regional solutions, both from a regional basis and kind of the wildfire recovery groups that were formed at the regional basis, state agency personnel, as well as just the ongoing legislative discussions and deliberations. That informed and built upon those initial 23 recommendations that came from that Recovery Council. Turned it into a pretty comprehensive spreadsheet that did identify the various needs across 4 major areas: housing, infrastructure being broken down into subgroups like water, transportation, broadband, so on and so forth. Economic revitalization and recovery, again, looking at some of the financial impacts that the fires wrought upon the various impacted areas. Property tax, again, with property now gone, how do you create some type of stabilization fund to reimburse communities that had been compromised? And then natural resource. What did it do to the natural environment, our ecosystem that was damaged? We had about 1 million acres burned in these wildfires here, so 4 areas of opportunities. From that comprehensive spreadsheet that actually totaled up to about $1 billion+, the evolution of then the House bill known as House Bill 3127, that was the bill that was again spoken to, debated within Mr. Clem's Wildfire Recovery Committee. It started to evolve. Several modifications took place to the point that a decision was made to only advance the needs that were identified that had resulted from the destruction or the devastation from the fire. So there was a direct link to the request or the ask that was brought forth to the fires themselves. In addition to that, another criterion used was those needs that were deemed critical to a community's ability to recover and rebuild after the fire. So those became the filters that were used to start to thin down, so to speak, the number of requests that were embedded in House Bill 3127. The final decision was to move those requests that had more of a mitigation orientation or a future focus, to take them out. Opportunities could have existed during the legislative session, to be very honest with you, to find other legislative vehicles to invest in them, but understand that the reality was this is pretty late in the game here. We were moving toward the end of the legislative session, so not a whole lot of time to find vehicles to move forward. That said, Mr. Clem's committee did pass out House Bill 3127. I think there were the -4s at that time with all these modifications. It moved to the Ways and Means Committee, where the professionals at the Legislative Fiscal Office and the presiding officers discussions to again vet the various issues embedded in that document. At the end of the day, a couple other modifications took place. Broadband was lifted out and put in a different budget box. Similar situation played itself out for water infrastructure, lifted out of the House Bill 3127, put in another budget box, which actually became the rescue money, ARPA money, ended up funding water infrastructure here. Close by saying at the end of the day, House Bill 5006, the end of the session, the budget bill, that what became the primary wildfire recovery funding vehicle. If you tally up all the recovery investments, it comes up to about $483 million, if my math is correct here. On the flip side, Senate Bill 762 became the primary wildfire response bill. There's roughly $195 to $200 million of investments to advance the response side there. So at the end of the day, we all know that the recovery process is a long arc. It will take many years, but I think as we move out of the most recent legislative session, there has been investment that allows us to move forward in our recovery activities. You can look to the horizon and look at some activities that are playing themselves out at the federal level in terms of infrastructure investment, in terms of wildfire response opportunities. You can look a little further. There may be an opportunity to secure a community development block grant disaster relief supplemental appropriation. We're having conversations with the congressional delegation to see if that might be an option. Those are rare and few and far between, but certainly the impact in the state of Oregon as well as some of the sister states, and we may have an opportunity to engage in a multi-state disaster relief supplemental. So I think the recovery conversation will play itself out in increments here, but you now have seen the infusion and the evolution from the Labor Day impact of those fires as we move through the initial response, taking care of the individuals that were displaced and compromised, losing in some situations just about everything they had, if not everything they had. Making sure we're taking those Oregonians to find their path forward in terms of response, and then eventually the recovery and the rebuilding of those communities that were totally impacted. So Madam Chair, with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, Matt, I think your presentation is very comprehensive, and I'm really surprised, quite frankly, that it is as good as it is. And recognizing the state efficiencies, lacking of partnerships. When Commissioner Schrader and I toured our South County and met with dozens and hundreds of people who were affected by the wildfire, who stayed and fought the forest fire when, frankly, our state agencies abandoned them, is what they told us, that there was no communications, no early warning systems, no responses, and everybody has a personal responsibility, but government has the ultimate responsibility in that. That is number one. And you're right in creating partnerships, more people to help fight the fires. And there's so many things I've heard and gathered, and correctly you have cited out the legislative actions, which I'm rather somewhat disappointed in some of the legislative actions, and especially Senate Bill 762. I understand there's still going to be committee hearings working on that to figure out what to do. And guess what, Matt? We're already in a high fire danger in this county. We have millions and millions and millions and millions and millions of dead timber on the floor that is more fuel for fire. We've already had 2 fires in this county, one above Estacada just last week from a smoldering stump from last year. The east winds picked up, which is really unheard of this time of year. In May, we had one in Redland that was put out. We were almost in the Redland fire in May. We were just this far from declaring another emergency. We got it under control. That was human caused, and we're trying desperately to tell people to be careful. We instituted a county-wide fireworks ban because of that, and we had over 600 emails come into our county office in a day and a half begging us to ban wildfires. But it was only unincorporated Clackamas County, but still that's a big deal. So people are still really, really in the fire mode right now. They haven't left that. And the fear and the angst and the anxiety is very, very real because they have not recovered.
Yeah.
The recovery is not there. It's not there from FEMA. And when Representative Clem had his hearings that you alluded to, I listened probably for 2 hours just to the citizens who testified. They were in tears because they have not had the assistance that they need. And frankly, we do need our federal partners in this. I've had some private conversations with our governor because I was concerned that within days of signing die, I did not see a lot of wildfire mitigations go to the individual counties. And so I started calling up my legislative partners. Where is it? Where's the protection for Clackamas County? Where's the protection? It wasn't there. And she says, I'll check on it. We've had private conversations with that. She has made a commitment to Clackamas County. I think that her attitude is enhanced over what it was last fire season. But I'll say this. When there's a fire burning that I can see from my house, and no effort is done to put it out because it's on federal grounds, what the heck is going on with our state government? If I was governor, I don't care who owns that property. It was the middle of August, knowing that it's wild, it would have been doused immediately. Damn the consequences. That's what needs to happen. The policy of letting wildfire burn on federal lands is not acceptable. That needs to be changed. Or, if you can't change it at the federal level, take responsibility for our property in our state, because it may be federally owned lands, but it's in our state and it impacts our people. And people died, not in Clackamas County. But I've talked to personal friends who lost their homes. I was evacuated for 21 days from my home. And I'm really happy that I had really spanking good insurance, but a lot of people didn't. And I still have a big hole in my backyard waiting to replace some stuff I lost that I can't get. But you know, from what I endured, but I remember the terror and I understand their fears. And I do think government has failed horribly in this on everybody, from the county to the state to the federal. And we must do better. We must do something. And we're at the point now is we can't control the forests anymore. We've totally lost control of our own forests. So what do? We stand back and we get ready for the next fire to come by implementing evacuations route, communications, trying to make our homes fireproof. You know, I never thought growing up, you know, I'm a fourth-generation Oregonian, I never thought I'd have to be at the state that I am now of, you know, just defense. It's defense because there's no offense to mitigate it in the first place. So that's my speech. This is an excellent presentation. I've always enjoyed working with you. I'm thankful that you came here today, and it was quite profound in your report. Any comments from commissioners? Commissioner Savas.
Thanks, Mr. Garrett, for your presentation. Very encouraging to hear a lot of what the state's doing. So I'm going to gather, I've got a question before I go on here. I'm going to gather that the recovery or the response is post-fire response, right, or not?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Savas, so the response really is the preparation, the action to suppress. So it's actually the front end. But where we stand right now, to the chair's mention, I mean, you're having this policy conversation. Listen, what can we take away from the trauma that this state and our communities went through in 2020? Because we're now in 2021, the fire season is upon us. We've already seen it. Riverside sparked up and rekindled that fire you were speaking to. I certainly understand that. That anxiety is there. So how do we better prepare? It's preparedness. That's response. Recovery is, again, the devastation happened. What do we need to do to take care of those issues? Again, be they housing issues, economic issues, infrastructure issues, or even the burn scars that we have. How do we make sure that we're taking care of the ecosystem in terms of restoration and reforestation? So that really is what I see it is wildfire is a coin, but you have response on one side, and the flip side of that is recovery. And you cannot have a conversation now without speaking to both those, response and recovery, because unfortunately we find ourselves right in the middle of it.
Right.
So what do we take away from this opportunity to prepare for the future, and how best can we respond as we move into the fire season that is upon us right now?
Right. So what I wanted to go, I love to see your after the state's after action report. And I'm really waiting for ours in July 20th here, a couple weeks from now. But whether it was COVID, there was this Labor Day fire, or whether it was the ice storm, we've had communication breakdowns that have affected all of this, right? The COVID, at least on the communication breakdown there, is the ability for people to connect with their work or connect with their doctor, so forth, a little bit more subtle. But we learned from the Labor Day fire when, communications, cell phone service, everything is overwhelmed or down. People can't communicate, they don't know where to go. So I think we definitely need better response, so I can relate to that. But let's just go back to the Labor Day fire. It definitely, I want to say burned in my memory, it's a play on words there, but it's unforgettable. And what I remember from that is that the state was managing, or trying to, or we all were managing fires all over on the state, right? It just wasn't this fire, that fire. There was several fires. And when Clackamas Fire, for example, and our other county fire districts reached out for response or help, outside response, everyone was tapped.
Yeah.
All resources were tapped. So they didn't have any help. They had to fight it on their own. So that was a surprise for all of us. So going forward, we have a drier conditions that we had a year ago. Okay, we are coming up, the anxiety that Chair and everyone our citizens speak to, they're nervous as heck right now. And I don't think they feel that we're doing enough. Whether it's the county or the fire districts or the state, for that after action, what are you doing? What are the remedies? So on. So my question is on will we find ourselves, God forbid, in a similar situation where we don't have enough resources to put the fires out, to respond to the fires? Should the governor have reached out sooner, or would that have even mattered if she reached out to have the federal assistance that we have? Because we had 3 or 4 days there with no help, and then the control was passed on to the federal forest fire. And thank God, they came and they responded well. Granted, maybe it could have been sooner, but I don't know how much resources of all these bills, the House bills and Senate bills that you referenced, spell out to people on the ground to fight the fires in the first place, and what other equipment, aerial, whatnot, there is available. How are we sitting today to put these fires out if we end up with a similar situation like Labor Day?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Savas, it's an excellent question. I think we're better positioned because of the conversation that took place in the last legislative session. So we have more boots on the ground. If you look at those frontline agencies, be it the Department of Forestry or the state fire marshals or emergency management, they have more boots on the ground. There are more personnel. They've made an investment in the people. They've made an investment in the gear, whether it's state-of-the-art aviation tools that have been applied already, advancing, getting the contracts for the aviation equipment and gear, making sure we have those available, because they're snatched up very quickly. Because you have to remember, during the Labor Day fires, the state of Washington and the state of California were going through the same thing, and that really stretched. We do have mutual aid with our sister states and everything, but they were battling their own fires here. You had a unique situation where we did see the heat. We did see the long spell that dried everything out. You have the fuels on the ground that exist right now. But you also had a wind event that just exacerbated and moved that fire across acreage at rates that are, it's just unfathomable. The grounds that were covered by the fires here. One would hope we don't find those ingredients coming together again. All indications are we're heading into a very difficult situation here, just what we have right now. The winds played a significant role. That's what swept across the 8 counties, and to your exact point. We were battling fires across the whole of the state. I think at its apex, we had 2,000 fires playing themselves out from the August to the September, October timeframe for all intents and purposes, with, again, significant fires playing themselves out over that 3-day period of the Labor Day holidays here. I would say we're better positioned because of the investments we made. Will we be stressed and strained? Yeah, I think we will. But at least we're moving and leaning into the conversation. In terms of the way we communicate, I think the calls and requests were made very quickly. and the resources were mobilized as quickly as possible. But we have to go to school where there are opportunities missed, and that's the reflection of the state's after-action review. I'm sure it'll be embedded in the county's after-action review. What opportunities may have been missed that will allow us to improve and better position ourselves for the future. Because unfortunately, all the indications are the next disaster is right on the horizon here. I just think that's being realistic and blunt. And we have to prepare our people who, again, are anxious from what they've been to. How do you not re-traumatize them, but inform them to better prepare, to be better prepared for these type situations? That's the obligation. That's the leadership I think the chair is looking for. You have to be there. Our constituents are looking for that leadership, and they're going to turn to government. And if we're not there, they're going to turn elsewhere, wherever that may be. And I'm not sure what that is, and I'm not sure how that void is filled if there's not a leadership position and posture from the various levels of government, from the federal to the state to the local.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Schrader.
It's nice to see you, Mr. Garrett.
It's good to see you, Commissioner.
I just want to drill down a little bit with the communication piece. Was the communication breakdown more technical equipment related, or was it really just lack of coordination between various groups?
I'll be honest, I think it was both. The infrastructure was compromised. We lost towers that took things out, which again is a takeaway that you need to be redundant, and you need to use all from the there was a very healthy discussion in the House committee talking about, well, making an investment in this Oregon alert system. It's a good investment, right? People can hop into it, but it's just one investment here. You can make basic investments to AM radio, which was up and running, but was it utilized? You're going to have to use it all, because if indeed the towers go down, the microwaves are compromised, we lose that ability. So I think it was the infrastructure side. We need to harden that up, make sure it's redundant, use all the opportunities we can to inform people. And again, I do think that the collaboration and coordination between agencies to ensure that information is getting out in real time. And as I said, translation services, and I had many conversations with Clackamas County. There were just constituents, their voice was not heard.
Right.
Nor were we communicating in their voice in terms of getting real-time information to them so they can make decisions to inform their efforts here. So we can tighten that up, and I think we're moving forward on that.
Was interoperability then a huge problem as well? So you're talking about the actual infrastructure of transmission not being redundant. So the next piece would be, as I said, do we have the equipment that's integrated and operable across the state or in these areas where they're communicating?
We have made investments, but not fully invested to ensure complete interoperability, to be very honest with you. This goes, I wore a previous hat at ODOT, where we made an investment, and the Department of Transportation was given the charge to advance the state radio project. But remember, at the time, it began as about a $900 million investment to truly attain interoperability, and at the end of the day, I think we spent $229 million, so we're not quite there. So we have a little ways to go for interoperability. But if your infrastructure is compromised and you don't have the redundancy,
Right.
you're going to lose
You're
it.
going to use both of it.
Yeah, you're right.
I have
Well,
one.
Matt, thank you.
I got one more.
You bet.
Follow-up. One of the things that we observed, Chair, when we went to visit the area outside of Malala, is that people were actively fighting the fires themselves with their own equipment, with their own water trucks, with their own backhoes. Some folks were relatively knowledgeable. There were a couple of foresters up there who had been, knew what they were happening, but basically you really had average citizens who were physically going to hot spots and doing that kind of fire break work. And part of the disconnect, I thought, as well, so that was very alarming to me, because they're putting themselves in peril in a way that, I would prefer they didn't have to put themselves in peril. The other disconnect is that when we had our TVFNR, Clackamas County Fire District #1, urban firefighters that fight buildings and infrastructure, it's quite different than how you fight forest fires, okay? They're two different ways of, so there was a lot of frustration because we would have some of our urban or, folks that are trained differently for just infrastructure up there, watching flames approach homes and not being able to do anything unless the flame actually started on the home. Because I don't know if you've ever talked about that disconnect, but that was extremely striking to me, that they said, no, we can't do that. And so they were told to back off at one point.
They were.
Am I correct? And and people did not understand the fundamental difference between the firefighting methodologies.
And you know what?
Yeah.
They don't care.
I know they don't.
They don't care. They see something that's burning up, and there's a fire truck sitting there, and they don't care whose jurisdiction it is. And maybe that should be loosened up too. I don't know.
Well, I think, and I know we're chewing up a lot of clock, and I apologize to my fellow presenters here, but I think it comes down to planning. I think it comes down to training. You're exactly right. There's a difference between wildland fire and urban firefighting here. A little investment in apprenticeship. I know a couple $1 million is coming Clackamas County's way on apprenticeship to grow those opportunities.
Good, they're forced.
Bottom line, we need more boots on the ground because we
Well,
don't
thank
want
you.
people put in harm's way.
Yeah, and they were. And Matt, I want to thank you for this presentation. We've got to move it along, and we have 4 or 5 more presenters. Thank you very much for coming, and we'll be in contact.
Thank you,
You
Commissioner
bet.
Chairman. Thank you.
Gary, who's up
So
next?
actually, I suggest have all speakers come up and as possible be brief, and then the board can ask questions to all the speakers.
Yeah, Daniel.
Okay, yeah, then I will call up everyone, call up Chief Nick Brown, Clackamas Fire District 1, to come on up. Just keep calling.
All of them.
All right, and then I'll call up SPG Dave Robertson and Bill Messner to come on up. Suggest you bring some chairs with you.
And just to let everyone know, Nick does have to leave early for his own board meeting.
And we'll have Nick go first.
Shane Abbott,
Yeah.
Clackamas County.
Nick, come up and go ahead and state your name. You understand you have to go to a board meeting and your
Yes, ma'am.
position.
Thank you very much. So I'm Nick Brown, Clackamas Fire Chief.
Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Well, they can introduce themselves as they speak. We want to get this rolling. Thank you very much, Daniel. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm humbled and grateful for the opportunity to be sitting before you and talk to you today and be included in this conversation. Obviously, the 2020 wildfires had a significant impact to our community, the men and women that we've sworn an oath to protect, the state, to the responders. And we've all learned a great deal from the past. As we're now approaching the 2021 wildfire season, I just want to briefly share on things that have changed and where improvements have been made. Madam Chair, you've spoke to a lot of what I was going to speak to regarding the high temperatures and the dry fuel conditions. Our 10-hour fuels, our 100-hour fuels, and our 1,000-hour fuels are at extreme low. We're seeing mid-August range in June, which is grave concern to us moving forward. We've already had a significant wildfire off of Nyber. You spoke to off of Redland.
Yep.
40-acre fire where we had to initiate level 3 evacuations in April. And in my career at Clackamas Fire, I've never seen that happen or the conditions that we had that early in April here. I've seen it in California. I've seen it in Central Oregon, but never here. Steps have been taken to minimize the wildfire risk, such as last week's ban on the fireworks, which I just want to say thank you so much for your action on that. And the area received very few firework-related fires, and I think it's because of the messaging that you guys did, and I just want to say thank you very much for that proactive approach to the safety for the communities. So we've increased resources since 2020. We have a federally funded 20-person hand crew known as Crew 30. Now what this Crew 30 is a fuel mitigation crew that their primary mission is fuel mitigation on public lands. And then they're also a Type 2 hand crew resource for us in the event of a major incident like we had last year.
That's excellent. That's new, isn't it?
Yes, that's new. It's the first of its state for a municipality to have. It's really excited about this hand crew. They're phenomenal. They get after it. They're good workers, and I'm really excited about that for Clackamas Fire and for the area.
Thank you.
We have upstaffed an additional Type 3 engine, which is it's a beefed up brush truck is what it is. It's the mix between a brush truck and a fire engine. It has off-road capabilities, and it carries more water. In the urban wildland interface, it's a phenomenal piece of equipment, and we have that housed out of Beaver Creek Station 10 now. We've established a resource list. Forever, we depended on ODF for our resource list, and they've been phenomenal, as Brent will say. He's a member on that list. But what we found in last year's fires that wasn't sufficient for us. So what we've gone out is we've established our own list. We have Type 3 helicopters, contractors, in direct contact with our emergency manager at Clackamas Fire. So in the event that we need them, we would call. We have contractors that have iron and water trucks. In the event that we have the same type of situation we had last year, that we have a phone call away with members of the public that could offer those resources for us.
Excellent.
The training. I heard the previous speaker and the question is the difference training between urban firefighters and wildland firefighters. And to say that that's not a reality is false. That's a reality. That has been. But Clackamas Fire has taken a proactive approach to this. We've gotten most of our command and general staff have task force leader and strike team leader level trained. All of our company officers are at engine boss level training. Sorry, I said all. About 95% of the company officers are still that aren't certified. We've partnered up with Clackamas Community College, outsourced our training to them, and the individual that's running that program, it was a Type 2 planning section chief for Alaska State in the wildfire world. He's phenomenal, and so he's leading the front on our training for Clackamas Fire.
Nice.
Our command and control for major incidents, we've upped the game there. We've better prepared the command and general staff from the fire chief down to be able to respond to major incidents like the ice storm, the wildfires, working on operational periods, and drumming up that incident management team that the state so offers in the event of situations like that. We're preparing ourselves at a local level to better prepare for a transition when the state comes in, should we need that in the future. We've established a Ready, Set, Go program implemented in May. It's basically a wildfire preparedness month for Clackamas Fire, focused on educating the public in 3 basic areas. The first is creating defensible spaces for homes and businesses. What Clackamas Fire did is we established a wood chipper grant program. We secured $40,000 in funding from Clackamas Emergency Services Foundation to give $500 grants to those needing to create and improve defensible spaces around the members of our public in Clackamas County. We have had a big education front for understanding the 3 levels of evacuation orders. Level 1, ready. Level 2, set. Level 3, go now. Signing up for public alerts through Clackamas County and creating that partnership. And then also, as I'm sorry, the first speaker, I'm forgetting his name.
Matt Garrett?
Yes, thank you. Speaking about that partnership with the state, of anything we've learned from last year, what happens when all resources get overwhelmed. And so we've really started working on that partnership with the state. And the state's done a really good job this year of starting to stage resources. They're taking pages out of California's book, and we were involved in staging resources this last weekend. They also had resources staged from across that were staged right at the state line with Washington, able to respond into the core here if needed. They were in the Dalles. So there's a very proactive approach amongst all the fire defense boards in staging resources and being better prepared for situations like that, because everybody's recognizing how dry and how serious of a situation that we have locally and across the state again this year.
Good.
I just want to do a quick review on how the state COMFLAG process works. so that everybody understands that the State Fire Marshal's Office has established fire defense boards. So Clackamas County has a fire defense board, Marion County, Washington County, Multnomah County, they all have fire defense boards, and it's made up of all of the local fire departments, and there's a fire defense board chief. And so what happens is anytime there's an escalating incident that the local resources can't handle, they have to exhaust all their mutual aid. So that would be Clackamas Fire mutual aiding with Tualatin Valley, with Portland, with Canby, with Estacada, with everybody that's on our mutual aid list. And once we do that, if the fire is still escalating, we then go to the fire defense board chief and we say we need to have a conflagration. They call the AOC, which is a direct link to the governor, and they request that from the fire defense board that we need a conflagration, to which the county gets involved as well as the state. What the state has asked us is to be prepared to be self-sufficient for 72 hours. And that's the amount of time to get resources in play. But what I'm going to say is the aggressive and proactive approach from the state in staging resources is to trim that 72 hours down to a quicker level, so that we can get to these fires in a much quicker manner. And then once the conflagration is declared, which it was last year, we had 2 incident commanders from the state that came in. They came in Thursday morning and took over the fire from Clackamas Fire at that point. And what happens is there's that transition of command, which would be from me as the fire chief to the IC from the state that comes in, and then the resources are, the transition of command is completed to the Oregon State Fire Marshal's Office, and then they would oversee the resources for that fire. I just want to say thank you for the proactive approach that everyone is taking, and for everybody being in here. One last piece I forgot to speak to is what I've learned about last year's fire is that we have resilient individuals in this county,
We do.
which is phenomenal. And the relationships that I've been able to form post-fires have been phenomenal. We have amazing firefighters, civilian firefighters, and then also the partnerships with PGE. We've never really interacted before. We have good communication now to be proactive as far as shutdowns and things of that nature in the future, that just getting everybody educated. So there's been a lot of good partnerships, but I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have.
Well, your report is very encouraging, and it sounds like the organization is well done, and you obtained more resources. Any comments from the commissioners for Nick Brown? Very nice. We look
Appreciate your
forward to
time.
communicating with you further,
Thank you, ma'am.
hopefully in a social level,
I would love
not
that.
a professional level.
I would love that. And
But
if
either way, thank you very
you
much.
excuse me, I have to leave.
I know you do.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
take care.
Appreciate it.
Who's up next, Gary?
Daniel?
Dave Robertson, Bill Messner from PG.
Dale, go ahead.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt, thank you very much for the chance to be here today. I want to echo the Fire Chief's gratitude for the partnerships with you, with the Fire Chief, with everybody in this room, even Matt Garrett, of course, too, with the state. So we are learning a lot, unfortunately, the hard way. My name is Dave Robertson. I'm the Vice President of Public Affairs for PGE. With me is Bill Messner, who's our Director of Wildfire Mitigation and Resilience, and Randy Ely is with us as well, who's our Local Government Affairs Manager. Also, Maria Pope, who the CEO wanted to be here today, sends her regrets. She had an appointment with her daughter, so she had to do that, and that I understand was a priority, so I appreciate the chance to be here with you today. A couple of things I want to say, and then I want to spend most of the time with Bill, because Bill really has spent a ton of time after the fires learning from the point where we were last year, where we had one PSPS zone. We activated a public safety power shutoff zone on Mount Hood. We activated that. We had a community resource center in Welch's. And we've learned so much since then, and Bill has really led the charge in the company, not only to create this new department. Bill used to be over security, safety, business continuity, emergency management, and I think Maria said, you need to spend all your time on this topic, and I think he's more than has a full plate in doing that, and we're super grateful he's able to do that. And so what I'd really like to do is turn it to him to talk a little bit about our plan, how we how we're changing and hopefully to continue growing our partnership with you all. But thank you for everything we've been able to do with you in the last year. I understand you've had to declare a number of emergencies in the last year, which must be very taxing and exhausting for all of you, and we're just grateful for the chance to come and collaborate and figure out how we can get even better together. So, thank you.
Dale. Go ahead, Bill.
All right, thank you. Next slide, please. And for the record, my name's Bill Messner with Portland General Electric. And then let's go one more, please. And I'll just kind of go through quickly and we'll have questions at the end. So the first slide here is just to showing our department. So I get the pleasure of leading it. It's the Wildfire Mitigation and Resiliency Group, and we have basically 3 arms. And Dave's handing out some slides, hard copies that you can follow along that way as well. But I'll start in the middle. The first group there you see is analytics. That is where we do our analytics about where our potential high fire risks are, and that's how we leverage identifying a total of 6 more zones, and there's another slide here that I'll show on that. It's also where we are doing research on new technologies about what we can implement into our grid in order to stop an ignition source to begin with. How do we harden our grid for the next construction standards as we always continue to improve it? The group on the left-hand side is Wildfire Operations. That is where we operationalize our activities. So think, Dave mentioned the PSPS, a power safety power shutoff. That's where we put that plan in place. It's where we work with operations. How do we execute that? How do we execute it safely and well for our customers and those that we serve? We just recently did a tabletop exercise on that about a week and a half ago. The other box is business continuity and resiliency. So we still have to prepare for all hazards as a company. Unfortunately, we've had COVID, we've had ice storms, so we always got to be prepared for those other things that can come our way. The bottom slide there, or the bottom portion of that slide, is really how we think of wildfire season. There's an active wild season, and there's a post. But basically, it's 365 days a year. And so what we're preparing for it, we're reaching out, we're having those communications ahead of time, making sure we have our communication strategies in place, we're exercising. In wildfire season, we're monitoring the weather. We have a meteorologist on staff doing us daily reports. We're in active watching with agencies about red flag days and seeing how that impacts our operations, how we need to change as a result of that information coming in. And then the last blue box there is just really, okay, we've just gone through wildfire season. What did we learn? How do we get better? How do we continuously improve? How did our partnerships with our agencies that we deal with, what ideas do they have? What can we do to get better? Next slide, please. And this slide here is just showing you all of our PSPS zones, and we'll go in a little bit deeper for the ones in this particular county. But the one long, skinny one there is the Mount Hood corridor. It's expanded a little bit based on our analytics and our risk analysis that we did this year. The risk analysis is based on probability of equipment failure. It's also based on probability that we can make contact with vegetation, and then what would happen if those 2 things did happen, how big of a fire could resolve from that. So we did 10,000 plus iterations of that analysis and ended up with these zones that you see here on this map. Next slide, please. So these next few slides are just doing it, you're zooming in on some of those that you saw on the previous slide. But what you're seeing here is the Mount Hood corridor. There's actually 2 slides here on this, but the stars you're seeing are those community resource centers that Dave mentioned. So last year we had one. The Mount Hood corridor is very long and skinny, so we're adding 2. The other one that you see there that's outside of that zone is one that's really for the Estacada PSPS zone, but we're just showing you it's very close by, so our communities could get to that center too as well. The centers are designed to have charging for your personal devices. If you have a portable medical device that you need to charge, you can charge it there. They're designed to be located for trying to get to a public transportation stop. So we're recognizing that not everybody has a car, but how do we best serve our customers? In addition to that, they can get ice and water, and information. So we'll have a kiosk there where they can get information about what is happening to the extent that's happening with our PSPS event. The next slide is just showing you, again, the Mount Hood corridor, just how it goes out, and then that's the Welch's star that we saw on the previous slide. Next slide is what we call Zone 3. It's in Oregon City, and it's where the Community Resource Center will be at the Oregon City High School. Zone 4 is Estacada, And that was the star that you saw on that first slide there, but that's at the First Baptist Church. And then Zone 5 is Scott Mills, where we're at the Butte Creek Elementary School. So all these, we've had worked with them. We have contracts in place with individuals. If not, they're very close, so we were having this all set up ahead of time. The next slide is just giving you just an overview of what we call critical facilities. And so part of the new temporary rule with the OPUC is they want us to have critical facilities identified, which we pretty much already do, but it's emergency responders, it's medical facilities, so even think dialysis, so those type of things. So how do we make sure that those critical facilities know about a PSPS event? And we'll be doing proactive outreach with them already. Probably started that month and a half ago. We were doing that even before the rule came out. This last slide here, which I call the bell curve, and this is one I'll take a little bit more time to talk about, but this is really how a PSPS event works. So I'll just go from left to right, and so on that early detection phase, it's what we'll call our normal operations. And so when we're in fire season, that's where we're having our daily operation briefs. First thing in the morning, where we're finding out about the weather, and we're finding about how fire agencies are posturing themselves. So if that's all, okay, we're just monitoring that. But if we see like a weather event coming in, so think Labor Day, hey, that wind is coming in, what are we going to do? Well, now we enter the watch phase. And now you've gone into that A on this bell curve. So that's when our corporate incident management team is in this watch phase, and we're watching the weather. We're telling our ESF 12, hey, we've entered this phase. The weather's still 5 days out, 6 days out, but we're watching it. Then we go, if it's still escalating and we see that going up, we go into what we call our warning phase. And so at that position, we're now communicating with our public safety partners, critical facilities, and saying this could happen. Then C is event likely. That's what we're doing, all communication to everybody that's in that PSPS zone. It's where we utilize reverse 911, which we had a great partnership with Nancy Bush last year that we were able to exercise that. And then we have event imminent. It's happening within 4 hours, and then we're in the event. And that's where now I'm at E on that bell curve. As you go through that, when the event is now, the wind stopped blowing, now we have to go and assess damage. Was there any damage? Because we're not going to turn the power back on until we know it's safe to do so. So we will walk every feeder and see everything that's, in blue sky event, meaning everything's perfect, we walked everything, we turn power back on. What we saw in Mount Hood corridor was that we walked the event and we had a lot of damage, and we took us another 3 or 4 days to prepare everything. We had trees, there were quite a few trees that were damaged due to the wind. So we'll do all that repair, and then we'll communicate. Now we're starting to come down that bell curve, telling our customers that power's going to be back on shortly, and then all the way down, when we get down to J, is all clear, power's all back up. There's another K there, which is we do owe a report to the OPUC, the commission, within 10 business days about our event. How did it go? What did we learn? How did we communicate? That's basically what we have to do. Sure. And so we provide that report to them in that time frame. The next slide you see here is just really all that communication I just talked about, just in a different format of how it goes through and who we're communicating with. And with that, I will pause.
Thank you. This is a very nice presentation. I will keep it. I want to thank PGE for their willingness to partner with us in messaging and just doing all the things that you're doing. We have a couple PSA videos that Maria Pope and I did. I'm not sure when they're going to be released or waiting to release those, probably go out this month. Just telling people what they could do, because as much as government and the private companies like yourself do, there is still a personal responsibility that people have to take themselves. And that's a message I continually bring home. And if you can make the investment, do it. Because, it could really save you. And, where I live, there's been often power outages, and maybe for a day. You can go without power for a day, but when you're going on 7 and 8 days, it really starts to drain on your system. You kick back on the power, oops, that appliance goes, oops, even though you have built-in surge protectors in your box, stuff still happens. And so, yes, I always thought that in my personal situation, that we were pretty self-sufficient living on the farm. Oh, we have this available. And I learned through the last fire season and the last ice storm that we could do better. And so we are doing better. And it's just, people, you've got to understand that government always won't be there to help you, even though you think they should. And they probably should. Everybody is spread really thin in a population that keeps growing in Clackamas County, that keeps because of increased population, where our systems have more overload on them. Our roads have more overload on them, and PGE has done a really good job in, quote, hardening your systems, and I see trucks out in the county every day. I mean, we're talking the major trucks. Pole replacement is a major investment I know you've done, wires and the trimming of the trees, and talking to our cities where our large population centers are for endangered trees. And something that I say to my mayors and chairs meetings, I says, look, I know that, a lot of your constituents have a love affair with trees. But, when you're without power for a week, you realize what's more important. I personally really like electricity. It does me very well. I don't like living in a cave. And I think a lot of the constituents in these cities, like West Lynn, they were starting to get grouchy. Well, they really like their trees. So, it's a balance. And I really want to thank the company. I call you guys the company. Because, hey, you're our all-stars. You're hitting the home run. So I want to thank you for that. Do we have any comments from commissioners for PGE? Dave, anything else you want to say?
No, Chair Smith, I'm fine, and thank you again for the chance to be here. Really appreciate the partnership, and any other guidance you provide. You guys have been great to also give us advice and kind of nudge us along and keep us going in the right direction.
Well,
So
we
thanks for that.
have some programs to offer that maybe you don't, and vice versa. So let's just take advantage of that. We're continuing to work together. We meet monthly going forward, and I think it's great. Thank you very much.
I just have one
Yes,
question,
Paul.
and that is that, so in anticipation of a fire, there may be situations where there might be outages, deliberate outages in the event, just to reduce the fire hazard, but it'll be broader than just the Mountain Hood corridor. That's what I heard?
Yeah, so we now have 7 PSPS areas that we have identified.
Right.
Right.
And that's what these are.
Yeah, and so that's what you see on that slide, this one here.
Okay, and PSPS stands for?
Public Safety Power Shutoff.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, I think one thing that I've heard our boss and CEO, Maria Pope, emphasize time and again is that if we need to, we'll shut off power for any community where it's necessary. And those are specific areas where we've identified the risk, we're doing the planning, we're putting in hardened systems to enable us to not have the fuses close back up if they go off because a branch has hit a wire. So there's a lot of work going in there, but Bill and his team are monitoring the whole network and making sure that we can keep people safe no matter where they live.
And she said that in the PSAs, and people need to understand that. In fact, when you turned off the power up Mount Hood, that probably saved just that whole massive area. It was very proactive, thank you.
So what are we doing to get that message out? So for those who might find themselves without power deliberately, and then suddenly they're lost, let's say they have medical equipment, or they count on that for communication, now they don't have, what are we doing proactively? And how can the county be a partner in that, I guess, in making sure that people have radios and all the other battery-powered stuff to fill that gap?
Yeah, so we're in our, there's a couple questions in there, but so our website has a whole bunch of information, but not everybody drives to the website, so we recognize that. But in our billing inserts, we've also are encouraging people to sign up for what we call medical cert personnel too, so to know who they are, so we can personally reach out to them in that time of need. So that's a self-identification, and I think that's one of the challenges that we have, is that people have to self-identify as well. So there isn't they have to tell me, they want to tell me. So we have to, and with that information, we have the ability to reach out. And we did, our call center did a lot of outreach when the Mount Hood Court, we called, we actually helped people, got them to services, we partnered with the county about where to guide people as well. So there's that aspect of it. And then we are actually, have a whole campaign too that we are trying to help educate, mostly concentrated in the PSPS zones, mind you, where we would actively turn off power. But I think there's a space where we all can work together to help educate all of Oregonians about wildfire safety. And I think that's, a great example you already shared today about with you and Maria is
We're trying.
that aspect of it. And I think it's a message that we gotta hit over and over. And I think one thing in emergency management is that it grabs our attention when we're in the moment, and it grabs our attention immediately after. And as time goes on, we start to drift and do the other things because we don't like, it's not human nature to think about the bad stuff all the time, right? But it's what we have to keep talking about to make sure that we get educated.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you
Thank
coming
you.
today. Daniel?
I'm going to just change the order and ask Mr. Brent Perry to go next, because I appreciate your leniency on allowing this to go a little longer.
Oh, sure.
And Shane can hold off, or we can hold him to another day if need be.
Are you sure? Brent, you're up.
He doesn't seem too disappointed.
Okay.
Thank you for inviting me to this policy session. So my name is Brent Perry, and I'm a business person in Eagle Creek, and I've served on some advisory boards for Clackamas County. I'm a CPO chair for Eagle Creek Barton. I'm also the newest member for CCI, which is Community for Citizen Involvement. I was on the front lines in Eagle Creek and Estacada and even down south up the McKenzie. So we have a logging company, and so we live by ODF's rules when we're working. We have all the fire equipment when things go bad. That's who they call, is they call us. I've heard a lot of stuff today, and I'm here to represent, the CPOs and the hamlets, and I'm also here to maybe give a little information that what was going on the grounds out there, which I think most of you know most of it. There was a big disconnect between the firemen and the public. And under the urban firefighting versus wildland firefighting, it took me a little while to figure out why they were there. Because to see an engine charged with hoses out and them not fighting a fire was traumatic. It was traumatic for a lot of landowners. So I had landowners calling us because they knew our status in the community as loggers and, firefighting wildland firefighters. And we went over and started putting out fires, but it took me a while. And there were confrontations between the firemen and us and our people. They were threatened to call the police on us for not standing down, which.
Are you telling me that public officials in professional capacity threatened you?
Firefighters.
Okay. I heard that.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure.
They were taken down fairly quickly by their battalion chiefs, once they figured out what was going on. We continued to make the effort to put the fires out. But the one thing that's important here is the evacuation orders were taking effect. And so many people were leaving. They were trying to get out as quick as they could. They were leaving their houses with what they had to carry, as some of you know. And their houses were vulnerable. So I heard 72 hours of coordinating, between the firemen today before they could call in resources from other people. Well, so for the first 3 days of this fire was very traumatic. It was moving fast. We were working hard, and and then as we were all out on fires, the tactical pause was uneasy. Because the firemen, we were working for Clackamas Fire, some of our equipment. They pulled all of us out. we had our own crews working on Eagle Creek Fire under our own, volunteer work, let's put it that way. And when they pulled us out with the heavy equipment, we went back to work at Estacada trying to fight back the fire lines that we established. And so the tactical pause, I mean, I've wrote lots of letters and I've had interviews with some papers, but it seemed odd to us to watch a fireman and, to run away from a fire was pretty disheartening, which led a lot of people very upset. And anyway, as time goes on, the mop-up began. The feds took over. There was a 2 or 3 day period where we couldn't, as loggers, couldn't work for anybody because once the feds took over, everything had to lay down. The feds started calling the shots. So there were 2 or 3 days there. That's when we decided we'd go try to save some of our own equipment instead of, obviously we left people there to help some of the landowners out that we were already working on. And then the important thing is Clackamas Fire wanted to backburn a lot of things. I don't know, they watched a lot of TV or something. But when they pulled them out, they had lit backburn fires, and there was a battalion chief that was coordinating with us, even though that they had let him, made him stand down. I still had telephone conversations with him, and he would tell us where they were, and then we would go extinguish them. So it was, there was a lot of, and it was overwhelming. Don't get me wrong. It was very overwhelming, and there was a lot of disorganization. And we tried to help. The local people really did try to step in and help with trying to figure out where to go, where to get water, because they're not allowed to get water in some of the places that we get water, So that was interesting in itself. So then the disaster was called and the feds stepped in. And then we got back to work putting out fires for industrial landowners, and the state obviously stepped in, and then we got going on that. Meanwhile, though, while we were all left our houses and the looters had stepped in, and I was hoping the sheriff's department would be here because there were militias formed. People's houses were getting looted, some people that stayed. The sheriff's department were knocking on doors, which, they were trying to make sure you were evacuated, or if you were staying, they gave you that choice. They put an X or an O in front of your driveway. I think the criminals knew exactly what that meant. And in some cases, they were looting and setting fires. We don't exactly have proof of that, but some of the sheriff's deputies brought up that. The militia that formed were having meetings, and they were very well organized, and the sheriff's department did show up, the deputies, and they did give a little information on what you could do for citizens' arrest and other things. So when those militias were formed, they wouldn't let anybody in or out unless they knew who you were, unless you could identify yourself properly, and that scared a lot of the citizens. Redland people were frightened because the militia would have guns, rifles, and pizza, so, it was interesting to see that happen. But then again, who protects your stuff when you're gone? There's obviously a lot of people that take advantage of people, and so if we do evacuate, where do we go? I mean, who is going to protect everything we've left behind? So now the people part of this is, the preparations that need to be made for the people in the rurals have to do with moving livestock. It has to do with getting down the road and evacuating. Which roads do we get to take? That was confusing. There was a lot of backup on some of the roads. So I had a list of the CPOs when we were fighting the fires out there, when the firemen left, there were a lot of people that just showed up with pickup trucks with barrels of water, and they had no direction. We were on the golf course putting out the backburn fires and some of the fires that were still burning, and we helped coordinate those people. We looked at them to the best of our ability to figure out where the best fit was, and then we would say, okay, and I want you to go over here, and I'd show them what to mop up and what to do. So there are so many people that wanted to help, and the outpour was huge, but they needed some sort of direction, you know, and so there are a handful of people. The CERT team wasn't available to Estacada for some reason, so we kind of know what the reasons are, but they're available now, you know, which, you know, things are coming along. But for the community, the questions would, how can the CPOs and hamlets help, you know, in getting the words out? And, you know, we have a strong email chain amongst our, you know, members that we have. And we have phone trees. And, you know, the coordination with the CERT teams, you know, we can, you know, we know our neighbors out there. And the one important thing is the emergency information that is being put out. What are the people exactly listening to? You know, are they listening? Are they looking at websites? You know, are they looking, you know, online? You know, these are the things probably that really ought to be, you know, we can spend $100 million on a website, but is that what they're looking at? You know, we have a lot of people that won't even go to a Zoom meeting in our CPO. So they want the hands-on touch. And even today, I'm trying to coordinate a meeting for Thursday, and I still can't get the hands-on touch from anybody. You know, so, you know, for instance, what are the reservations that need to be made to ease the traffic evacuation? These seem like they're pretty easy for the county to maybe, you know, put some, you know, coordination efforts together to figure out what's the best way out of communities, Mohawk, Estacado, Sandy, besides some of the highways. Some of those highways are inferior, as you know, and it's very difficult to get out of Estacado.
I was on that.
Yeah, so, and then, you know, who's going to protect the properties when we have to evacuate? I mean, this is a good question for the Sheriff's Department. I mean, will the militias form again? And will they be as coordinated as they were, which they were very well organized? You know, so, and there, let's see. And the information on where the fires are exactly at and where they're moving to. Because I think a lot of people were evacuated that didn't have to evacuate. And I had lots of members calling me and say, where is the fire? You know, do I have to evacuate? You know, what do you think, Brent? And I don't want that on my shoulders. But, you know, we knew where the fires were. But the media had everybody scared to death. And the last fire, which was up Fish Creek just a week ago, 2 weeks ago, one of the guys that had his house burned up at Hillock Burn called me and he said, I smell smoke. He said, I just replaced my house. I can't get any answers from the federal forest guys. What do I do? You know, so I started making calls. I made a call to Katie Wilson, and I said, hey, you know, we might want to look into this. We need, you know, we need the state to step up, manage some of the fires that the federal forest won't manage, you know, and get some of that stuff put out. But I think that's all I had for you guys.
Well, thank you, Brent. You know, the stories you tell here are stories that Commissioner Schrader heard in probably any community in South Clackamas County. We did Molalla, we did Estacada. I know this was true in the Scotts Mills area about people standing up and refusing to step down when they were, quote, ordered to do so by our professionals. I believe that was a really bizarre occurrence to me. That they would do that. Traffic evacuations, hey, we only have so many roads in the county. And it was bumper to bumper, Beaver Creek Road going out. And I think this particular event was so horrific. When daylight turned to dark, and my husband took one pickup, and I took the other pickup, and we had a friend in Happy Valley says, come on and stay. And I remember in that long line of cars down Beaver Creek Road, and my wiper blades are going so fast just to keep the ash off so I could see the road in front of me. It was like the worst snowstorm you could ever be in, and it was ash. And the terror was leaving my house, thinking that I would never see it again, and then making sure that embers did not fall on my truck, and I was fearful that we would blow up. And that's not even a reasonable fear, but those fears are out there. Those fears are out there. And when you talk about the sheriffs coming, yeah, I have a red X on the bottom of my driveway painted on the road, and it really made me mad. Really made me mad, but I was so grateful that our sheriff's department, and I was down at Command Central, and the efforts that they did, because not one single life was lost in our county, and not one single person was hurt. But then I was so vulnerable, okay? My brother stayed on the family farm to protect us, and I had neighbors stay, and I was fortunate because I had a lot of people check on us, but we had to leave. And so I really am hoping and praying that this incident does not repeat itself on the sheer magnitude. And Martha and I saw trees that are like petrified wood in that they're shaped, they're bent, at an angle, like at a 30-degree angle. They'll be that way forever because the wind was so great and the fire was so hot and it swept through so fast. But the best thing we can do is we can learn from this. I really love the idea of the hamlets helping the CPOs. People just need to start getting a list of AM radios, stocking water, if you can afford generators. If you have an evacuation that you can go to, and like I said before, it's kind of a really interesting state of affairs that we find ourselves in, but nevertheless, we must do the best we can as we move forward. I know Clackamas County is working hard on our preparedness going forward and trying to organize people. I've had conversations with the Red Cross director. They're willing to go out and train CPOs and hamlets to organize, and we really are listening. And it's like, moving a huge boulder uphill to get going. And I sure appreciate you coming forward because every single story you told today is so true. It was repeated probably 10 times in South County. Thank you very much. Do we have any comments for Mr. Paris?
A few questions. Thank you, Brent. Really appreciate you being here. I would just love to spend more time with you, just really digging into what your experience was. The piece that was really difficult for me when this was all happening, and I knew that there were our folks out there, residents out there fighting the fires, when these two fires were coming to merge, and if they would have merged, it was explained to me that it was going to be catastrophic, that it was going to just create an explosion like it was very dangerous. And I just remember those moments of being so nervous for thinking, we didn't know for sure, but that's my understanding why they said we are prioritizing life and safety, and fire is, taking a pause. Firefighters are taking a pause because of the anticipation that was going to create a massive explosion. At that time, there were residents out there with their fire lines and fighting. And that's just terrifying to me. And I guess, and you don't have to answer it now, we can talk about it, but I think that's one of the questions that we have to, how do we get on the same page? How do we communicate information? Because if those two fires would have merged, it would have just been so tragic, more tragic than it was. And I would really like to dig in on that issue. I don't know if you have any comments now. I have some other questions for you, but you might have some thoughts on that, or?
Yeah, well, I started working for Publishers Paper Company, 1986. And alls we did was fight fires because they did broadcast burn just about everything that they did. So I got to learn a lot in my younger years, which, has paid off greatly. And we've even helped Clackamas County Forestry, fight some of their fires that they've lit with the intentions that it was going to rain, and then it didn't, and then the east wind came and blew things up. And it's easier to teach people how to wildland firefight. It seems much easier for me. We look at meteorology every day because we work in the woods. I would like to say we are the biggest environmentalists that are out there. And the one thing about that day is the wind stopped blowing. And when they told us to leave, we continued even though we couldn't see, and I was listening over the hill trying to find the fire. But there was no wind. It was a dead calm day, and we were so confused. And I do understand I'm not educated, but they did say that if those fires did converge somewhere in the atmosphere, it would form its own wind and weather. So that was something, but to leave somebody's house burning down wasn't our forte. We kind of like to get things done, so we stuck and fought the fires with many other people.
Well, I'm very thankful that they didn't converge, and I really hope we can get on the same page if there's a future fire event. I mean, I kind of look at it like there's a tidal wave coming, and you got to get out, or you're going to be taken out, and I don't want to see that happen in our county. And if whatever we need to do, we got to figure that out so that we have better communications. I mean, I heard firsthand of the challenges of trying to get the information for those who are out there doing our residents who are trying to hold the line, and that was really tough. So that's just my first thought. I really want us to work on that. I think it's really important. My second thought, I wanted to call back, you had said that there were looters and that there were people starting fires, but you didn't have any evidence of people starting fires, but that the sheriff's office had mentioned that. And I want to make sure I have the correct information. My understanding is that that report was disqualified, I guess. It said that was not true. Our sheriff stated that there weren't reports of people starting fires. There was one incident down by in Oregon City with some leaves of a person who had some mental health issues, but out in the wildfire area. And that's just important. If you have information that you know of people, of individuals, or there's evidence, or there's pictures, or there's anything, I mean, please report that. Our sheriff's office and our deputies were out there getting information. They were working massively to make sure, because there was some concern about looting, and they were patrolling heavily during the wildfires.
I think that's why they showed up at those militia meetings, because they didn't want any hostility. And they were very clear. They did a fantastic job. And I would like to say that the recovery effort that was made was fantastic. People just came out of the woodwork to help. And the sheriff's department did an excellent job, making sure that people were evacuated. And I do commend them. The stuff that we heard is all stuff that you hear,
I was hearing it too and tracking it down all those days of that fire, trying to make sure that every report that was legitimate got to our sheriff's office, because that would be an absolute act of domestic terrorism if there are people out there starting legitimately, or just intentionally starting fires when there's massive wind and a storm. And we just can't, if that's happening, we would have to have a very massive response, more so than what it was.
We would like to see an answer from them.
From who?
The Clackamas County Sheriff's Department on some of those accusations.
Well, the sheriff's office issued many reports. during the wildfire, Sheriff Roberts, and I don't know about the rest of everyone else, I had conversations really tracking that issue while the fires were happening.
Yeah.
Because it was a serious concern. But if people have information, please report it. I think our sheriff's office will, it'd still be an active potential crime. So.
Outstanding department.
Yeah, and then the other piece I just want us to think about, I know I'm taking a lot of time, but the idea of our, they call it the hillbilly brigade, is that the term that I've heard?
Yes, south of
Yes,
Malala.
yes, and others, and
All my
even,
friends.
even the militias. I would really like to see us plan to bring this all into a more coordinated, cohesive effort.
That's
And
what we're going to try to do.
I know it's not easy, and people feel that they have to protect home and property, and I get that, but we really want to make sure that we're ready.
We do, absolutely. Well,
I appreciate it.
thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate your time. We'll be reaching out.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes. Gary, what's up next? Do we have?
There we go. That was the end of the presenters. So thank you all for our presenters for being here today and sharing your perspective and your forward-looking ideas of what will happen the next time there's a wildfire, which we hope not, but let's be realistic, it will happen. For you commissioners, you will have the county's after-action report in a few weeks here. We will also have a policy session in a few weeks on Chair Smith's idea that she's talked about for 6 months now on forming a disaster preparedness task force community action group. So we'll have more information on that to get that moving. And so it's just we're moving forward now, using all the lessons we've learned over the past year on how we'll do things differently and better the next time, which there will be a next
And I
time.
think there's going to be a role for every commissioner to play in this if they want to, and I'm sure you do. It's-
Absolutely.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
So this was just an informational update, the first of many to come this month, but thank you, commissioners, for your engagement. Thank you, staff, for being here, and all of our guests. We appreciate very much all you do and your perspective.
Thank you for coming.
And that's your last policy session for today.
Do we have an update? I believe we have an update
Yeah.
on an earlier issue we spoke about. Commissioner Savas?
Yeah, so I did reach out to Mayor Gamba. He managed to call me back. We had a conversation, and I shared my thoughts and a similar situation 10 years ago with the dispute between CCSD1 and the city of Milwaukee and how we solved that with then Mayor Ferguson. So I offered a similar kind of a opportunity where maybe myself, the administrator, our attorney could sit with their like folks and sit down and figure out what we can do to fast track an IGA and a solution to all this. And he was open to that. Kept it positive. And so I just wanted to put that out there. I did speak to Gary afterwards, directly after that phone call. And he did request a little bit of information to get so that he knew it, but apparently his comment to me was they were only aware of our efforts to get the agreement for the last 30 to 60 days. I was kind of stunned by that. So what we thought was action taking place, apparently they did not know of or were aware of. That was from the mayor today. So I take that for what it's worth.
So it's
And
staff to staff.
seems to me that, once I heard that, I felt maybe it's best that we fix this at a high level and just
Yeah.
get it done.
That's
So
what
with your
happened in-
support, I would
happened in
appreciate
Pasadena.
just,
Well, Paul, I was glad you were able to communicate that and talk this through. Yeah, I would like that to be done as soon as we can, and it sounds like there's a willingness to get this agreement done.
so,
Thank you very much for that.
So with your permission, I'll schedule this meeting with Mayor Gamba and Commissioner Savas, the city manager, myself, and our attorneys. Is that okay, commissioners? We'll do it for next week. Okay, we'll make it so.
that's all I
And
have.
that's all we have, unless you have anything else, Chair Smith.
I don't. Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you, commissioners, for a very
Thank
good
you,
day.
guys.